Today's lesson is Chapter 8, Lesson 1, Function Tables. We have 5 vocabulary words for this lesson, and they are function, function rule, function table, independent variable, and dependent variable. On the next slides, I will give you the definitions that you need to write down in your notebook. So the first term is function. A function is a relation that assigns exactly one output value to one input value. A function rule describes the relationship between each input and output. A function table, you can use this to help organize the input-output values and function rule. We have an independent variable. This is the input value, so they're kind of the same thing. And this can be any number that you choose. And then the dependent variable is the output value. This depends, notice how it's dependent variable. It depends on what the input value is. And then that will determine what your output value is. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a table, and I want you to put it in your notebook, and I will label where all the terms are so that you can understand them a bit better. Okay, for this slide, we're not going to actually solve a problem, so I'm going to kind of scratch this part off, and I'm just going to focus on the table and the parts of table. This kind of goes with all of our terms. So I want you to draw this table into your notebooks right now. So you can pause the video and then you can draw the table in. Okay, now that you've created the table, I want you to make a box around the whole table. Remember, a table is just something to use to organize some information. So this is called our function table. Okay, so we're just using this table to make things look more neat and also to keep our math organized and so that we can see it easier. Another thing I want you to do is I'm going to have you circle this x plus 7, and that is called our function rule. So that's always where the function rule is going to go. This tells us what is going on in this table. Okay, it's the rule. We have to follow this rule in order to get the correct answers. So we have our function table, and then in the top middle we have the function rule. So make sure you have that labeled. The next part of the table that I want you to do is I'm going to have you put an oval or circle this column of your table. And notice that it says input, which it is. Another name for it is the independent variable. So I'm going to write that out. And we have 3 independent variables right now. We have a 10, a 12, and a 14. Okay, and I just picked those numbers. I can choose any number I want to do for those. And then what happens is, those are my input. That's what's going in. And then I follow my rule, which is right up here, and I plug that into the rule. So my input is x, so I have 10 plus 7, and I know that that's 17. And I'm going to keep doing that for the other ones. I got to plug in my 12 for the x. 12 plus 7 is going to give me 19. That's the output. And then I'm going to do the last one, and I'm going to plug 14 in. 14 plus 7, because this is the rule, and I know that's going to give me 21. And then the last thing we're going to circle is this. This is the output, and this is called the dependent variable. Because the numbers that are in this column all depended on what number we plugged in. Notice when we plugged in a 10, our number was 17. The input created the output of 17. 12 created 19. So 19 depended on 12 to give us this answer. and then 14 gave us 21. So 17, 19, and 21 would be the dependent variable, or it's called the output. Okay, so on the last slide, we just labeled everything. And I kind of solved it quickly, but I want to read you what a problem would sound like and how you would solve it for your homework. So I'm going to read the directions right up here, and it says the output is 7 more than the input. The output is 7 more than the input. So my input is right here, which is x, and then it's x plus 7. That shows us 7 more, and then we're going to solve. So I know my input is x, so I'm going to put that in to my rule, 10 plus 7, and then what comes out, or what is my answer, is 17. Then I have another input of 12. I'm going to put that into my rule for x. 12 plus 7, and then my answer, or what comes out of that, would be 19. And then I have 14 to put in as my input, and what comes out is 21. Okay, so it's very basic. They give you the information, they give you the rule to follow, and then you just have to do the math, the simple math. And then that would be your answer. You would just have to fill in that table. Okay, now that we figured out the table, I want to show you the next step that you're going to do. And notice how the input is x. What do you think the output is going to be? If one thing is x, the other one's probably going to be a y. Because when we graph, we always have an x and a y. So I might make a smaller table with an x and a y. This is just a t-chart, and this is going to help me graph. So I have a 10, 17, notice right here, 10, 17, and then I have a 12, 19, 12, 19, and I have a 14 and a 21, 14 and a 21. And I'm going to use this information to create a graph. So on the next slide, I'm going to be creating a graph for you guys using these coordinates, 10, 17, 12, 19, and 14, 21. So I'm using the information from the table and putting it into a graph, which you'll see in a moment. Okay, on this slide, what I did is I just transferred that same information from the previous function table, and I created my t-chart over here with my x and my y's. So before I get started graphing, I just have an x and a y axis, and now I want to fill in what needs to be filled in. So I'm going to put my arrows, and I'm going to label this as the x-axis. I'm going to put my arrows, and I'm going to label this as the y-axis. I'm going to tell you that this is quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4 as a reminder. And I'm going to, I notice my x's over here are 10, 12, and 14. I don't really feel like counting up that high and making that small of little tick marks. So I think I'm going to count by twos. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. And then I'll count by twos on the way up. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. And I don't have any negative numbers, so I'm not even going to put tick marks to the left and down because I don't need to use them for this graph, okay? And since I just counted them out, I don't think I need to label the numbers right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to graph my first pair, which is 10, 17. And remember, if that was written, I would have it 10, 17, and this would be my x and this would be my y. So I walk first forward 10 spots. And remember, I went by twos. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So I'm at 10 and I need to go up to 17. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. Oh, so I see my 17 isn't going to be on a tick mark, so it's going to be in between the 16 and the 18. Okay, so that's that point. Now I'm going to do my next point, 12, 19. This one I can go right to 12 and then up to 19, which is going to be in between the 18 and the 20. It's not perfect, but I'm doing my best. Then the last one is 14, 21. So 14 all the way up to 21. Okay, so I have my 3 points. I might connect my points to create a line. And I would call this line the name of my function rule, which was x plus 7. Do you remember that rule that we had at the top of our table? So that's what I would name that line. And then I'm done graphing it. Okay, I see I have another function table. I have my input and my output, and my function rule is in the middle. At the top it says the output is 5 times the input. And I know that because it says 5 times x, which means 5 times the input, okay? So that's what that is telling me. That's my rule. And I see that I have my inputs. They've given me that information. So all I have to do is fill in the rest of the table. So my input is 8 for the first one, and I'm going to plug that in to my rule. My input is going into my rule. 5 times 8 is 40. Oh, excuse me. I don't put my answer there. That's where I put the rule. So I have to show my work. 5 times 8. So that's where I show my rule, and then my answer goes over here to 40. Okay? The next one, I need to use my 10 this time into the rule. 5 times 10, that's 50. Okay? And then the last one, I need to plug in 12. 5 times 12 is 60. Okay? And you don't need to say this or write it down, but notice that it's going up by 10 each time my output is. That's just a pattern I'm just noticing right now. And I bet if you graphed it, you would also see that it's going up by 10 each time. If I was to graph this, which I'm not going to do just to save on time, I would make my t-chart, my x and my y. Notice these are my x's, it tells me that. So I have 8, 10, 12. I'm pulling those right from the table, 8, 10, 12. And then the output is my y, which is 40, 50, 60. So if I was to graph this, my points would be 840. I'd walk over to 8 and up to 40, 10, 50, and then 12, 60. And then I would create that line and label it with the function rule of 5x. That would be the function rule. I have another function table I need to fill in. This one is telling me my rule is x minus 4. So right here is my x's, and I need to plug that into my rule. So I have 4 minus 4. Remember in this column I show my work. I know that 4 minus 4 is 0. Gonna do the next one, 7 minus 4. My output is then 3. 10 minus 4, show my work, and I'm going to get 6. This is my y. So if I was to graph this, I would have 4, 0, 7, 3, and 10, 6. I see I have a function table again. Notice the lesson is called function tables. I have my input. This time, I really noticed that I don't have anything here. Okay? There's nothing in that spot. And so I'm not quite sure what my input is. And I know my rule is 3x. But this time, notice, boys and girls, they're giving me the output. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of those circles, and I'm going to read the directions. Use the work backwards strategy to determine the input. So if my output is 6 and my rule is 3x, I have something times 3 to give me 6. So we've done this in the previous lesson. So basically it's showing 3x equals 6. And now I know that 2 would give me that solution. If I plugged 3 times 2, I would get 6. So over here, my input is 2, because that's what I plugged in for this x. Okay? And then I would show my work. 3 times 2 gives me 6. Okay? I need to solve it for 15. So I'm going to do 3x equals 15. Well, that's easy math. I know that 3 times 5 gives me 15, so my x would equal 5, or my input would equal 5. Show my work. 3 times 5 equals 15. Okay, I need to work backwards again for 21, so I'm going to do it down here. 3x, remember that's my rule, that's where I'm getting the 3x, equals 21. Simple math, x equals 7. I'm going to plug that in for my input and show my work. 3 times 7 gives me 21. And that's all you would do. And then if they asked you to graph it, you would figure out what your x and y's are. 2, 6, 5, 15, 7, 21. And those would be your points. 2, 6, 5, 15, 7, 21. Use the work backwards strategy to determine the input. Okay, so I have my rule and I have my answers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write my rule up here. 2x minus 1 equals 1. I'm going to do the first one. Okay, I'm going to put a wall here because I notice this is a two-step equation. Plus 1, plus 1. That cancels this out, and that leaves me with 2x equals 1 plus 1 is 2. So what times 2 would give me 2? Well, 1. So my input is 1, and then I'd show my work. 2 times 1 minus 1 would give me 1. I'm going to try it again with 3. I'm going to use my rule. 2x minus 1 equals 3. Okay, I'm going to try and solve for my variable, so I'm going to add 1 to both sides. This cancels out. I'm left with 2x equals 3 plus 1 is 4. 2 times what gives me 4? Well, I know 2 does, so 2 would be my input. So 2 times 2 minus 1 would give me 3. Okay, I have one last one to do, and this time it's 5. So I use my rule, 2x minus 1 equals 5. I'm going to build my wall, add 1, 2x equals 6. What times 2 gives me 6? I know 3 does, so 2 times 3 minus 1 would give me 5. And that's all you would need to do. So it's the work backwards strategy. So you use the rule and the output to figure out the input. Okay, with function tables, we can have word problems. So here's a word problem that you might get in your homework, and you're going to have to create a function table in order to solve the problem. So it says the Quas family is traveling at a rate of 70 miles per hour. The function rule, that's important, that represents this situation is 70x, where x is the number of hours. So x equals hours. That's important. So make sure when they tell you what x stands for, you know what that is. You're going to make a table to find how many hours they have driven at 140 miles, 280 miles, and 350 miles. Then graph the function. So I'm going to make a table, and when they don't have one made for you, you're just going to have to make one by yourself. So I know there's 3 columns. There's an input column, and that's always the X. There's the rule column, and then there's the output, and that's also your Y value. Okay, and I'm going to make the 3 columns, and then I'm also going to add 3 rows for us to do the math. Okay, they told us that the rule, they told us right up here, the function rule is 70x. Okay, and this is just x, and this is y. Okay, they want us to know how many hours they have driven, and remember x equals hours, at these certain miles. So if x is hours, I'm going to assume that y, or the output, is going to be the miles. Okay, so I just kind of had to use my own thinking to figure that part out. And I'm going to plug in then these miles that I know. And I'm probably going to go in order from least to greatest, so 140, 280, and 350. Okay, so notice I've had to plug in all this information, but it's pretty easy if you have it labeled. So I have my 70x as the rule, and I need to figure out what my x is. So I'm going to put 70x equals 140. And I need to solve for x. I'm going to divide by 70 on both sides, and I know that my x is going to equal 2. And I could look at it without the zeros and know that 7 goes into 14 twice. So 70 twice would be 140. So right here I would put 70 times 2, and I would put 2 right here for hours. 2 hours would get me 140 miles for the Quast family trip. Okay, I'm going to erase my work over here, and I'm going to try it for the next rule. Not the next rule. Our rule always stays the same. I'm going to try it for the next quantity of miles. So I'm going to do 70x equals 280. And I might as well do the last one with it. 70x equals 350. Okay, I'm solving for x, so I'm going to divide by 70 on both sides. I know that my x is going to equal not about 4, it's going to equal 4, because I know that 4 times 7 is 28, so 4 times 70 would give me 280. So I'll fill that in, 70 times 4, and 4 hours, and then my output is the 280 that they gave us already. I'm going to do my last one, divide by 70, x equals 5. 70 times 5 and 5 hours. Okay, it told me to make a table. I did that, check, and now I need to graph the function, check. So you would need to figure out that you would be graphing, let's use a different color so it's easier to see, 2, 140, that would be one of your points. 4, 280. You might be thinking to yourself, wow, that's a huge graph. But I would maybe go up by different increments. Then 5, 350. I'd go up by 1s on the x, and I'd probably go up by maybe 40s on the y. So why don't you try that in your notebook and then bring that to school tomorrow to show me that you graphed these points. And that is all for Chapter 8, Lesson 1.